Hi, I'm Diane Kaplan. I'm here to tell you about a book I've written entitled An Introduction to the American Legal System, Government, and Constitution. But before I tell you about the book, I'll tell you a bit about myself. After graduating from Yale Law School, I worked as a federal judicial clerk, then as a practicing lawyer at a national law firm, and then as a law professor at the John Marshall Law School in Chicago, Illinois. During my professorship, I also taught American constitutional law in China to members of the Communist Party who worked for the Chinese government and to private Chinese lawyers. After several years, the Chinese government asked me to write a book about the course I was teaching, which I did, and which is published by and is still sold by the Chinese government, but exclusively within China. When Aspen Publishing Company, now known as Wolters Kluwer, learned about the book, they asked me if I would write a book for foreign students who come to study at American law schools and for American college students who are interested in learning about the American Constitution and legal systems. And so I did. This book uses historical and contemporary events to explain the relationships among the federal and state governments, their branches, their legal systems, and how their uses of the federal Constitution have developed a constantly changing and highly diverse nation. The book primarily consists of 8 chapters about the Constitution. Most chapters rely significantly on judicial opinions as a teaching method. The chapters become more challenging as the students continue to learn. Chapter 1 provides a brief historical background about how the colonists achieved independence from England, created their nation, and developed their Constitution. It also introduces several of the first articles and amendments of the Constitution. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 discuss how the Constitution distributes power among the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of the federal government. Chapter 5 discusses the constitutional principles of separation of powers, checks and balances, and federalism. Chapter 6 discusses how certain First Amendment provisions influence the rights and responsibilities of American citizens, and how these same provisions also empower and restrain the powers of the state and federal governments. Chapter 7 discusses how the federal and state litigation systems operate, and Chapter 8 discusses criminal laws and the due process protections a government must provide to criminal defendants. Although some of the cases, events, and discussions are classic and historic, many are contemporary, so that today's contemporary students can relate to them, such as juvenile criminal cases, free speech school cases, and laws involving the use of marijuana. For example, 2 cases involve same-sex marriage and have very similar analyses. Both opinions base their analyses on the due process and equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment. Both opinions questioned whether their states' prohibitions against same-sex marriage satisfied the rational basis test. Both addressed the historic meaning of marriage. Both acknowledged recent changes in public opinion for and against same-sex marriage. Both questioned whether the judicial or the legislative branch had the constitutional authority to legalize same-sex marriage. But the 2 opinions reached very different decisions. Another contemporary issue that the book deals with involved 2 Supreme Court opinions, Rasool v. Bush and Hamdi v. Rumsfeld, that discussed the detention of captured Taliban insurgents in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. After reading the 2 opinions, the students are asked to explain why Justice Scalia agreed with the government's arguments in Rasool, but disagreed with the government's arguments in Hamdi, and then decide whether and how to reconcile the 2 opinions. For the benefit of the professors, the end of each chapter contains a list of questions, debates, and problems which should significantly reduce the amount of time the professors will need to prepare their teaching of the book. And since there are numerous and varied questions at the end of each chapter, a professor can choose which of them to use to teach the chapter. For example, Chapter 3 explains how opinions are written and then provides a list of questions that must be answered when writing a case brief. The students are then asked to write a case brief on the case the Heart of Atlanta Motel versus the United States, and throughout the rest of the book are asked to write case briefs on the other cases they read. However, as the book proceeds, the questions about the judicial opinions become increasingly more challenging. The question sections also typically ask students to analyze legal issues and develop arguments on behalf of the various parties, compare cases that conflict with each other, develop theories for interpreting the Constitution, and explain how constitutional provisions affect federal and state legal systems. I hope this presentation has been helpful to you. If you have any issues or questions about the book, please feel free to contact me at 7kaplan@jmls.edu. Thank you.